Welcome, welcome, welcome. As a reminder, the Free Library of Philadelphia Foundation, we are here to support and enhance the services at the Free Library in our 54 branches across the Philadelphia area. That is in every neighborhood. The work the library does is begins with books but is beyond books. And if you know the national statistics, that more than 80% of the adults that visit libraries are going there to access government benefits. So your support of our programs, your donations help us not only serve children in the community, literacy, but you literally can help people transform their lives through digital literacy, financial literacy, and helping with workforce development. So let's give an applause for that. Libraries are our new community centers, so thank you in advance. A quick reminder, we're so excited to have this partnership with WHYY, two nonprofits in the city that are here to serve you. This program is no different. We need you to what? Silence your phones, and we appreciate if you can do that right now because we are recording and we know Dr. Ayla is amazing, don't we? Like, she is such a hero. And so we look forward to continuing to partner with WHYY and continuing to see you here at Parkway Central for all of our programs. At this time, I have the privilege of introducing Cherri Gregg, tonight's moderator. Cherri Gregg is an afternoon drive host news anchor for WHYY Radio and co-host of the station's flagship radio news show, Studio 2. She is also the executive producer and host of the Good Souls Project, WHYY's effort to highlight individuals serving as role models for compassion, generosity, and service. Prior to her current position, the award-winning, I lost my place, journalist covered civil rights, social justice, race, and public affairs issues impacting marginalized communities, spending nearly a decade on air at KYW News Radio and CBS 3 Eyewitness News. Cherri, who is also a licensed attorney, like myself, don't hold that against us, is a founding member of the board of directors of the Law and Justice Journalism Project, a nonprofit focused on shifting the journalism narrative around public safety, crime, and justice. Please help me welcome Cherri Gregg to the stage. Cherri Gregg to the stage.
Give the best and the warmest round of applause to Dr. Ayla Stanford. And as we welcome her to the stage. So, how do you feel? Your city loves you, Ayla.
Well, I love my city. Which is what got everything started. I love people, humankind, human beings. I'm an empathetic person, but I love my city. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, everything about it. It is what made me who I am, the grit and the challenge, being born and raised in Philadelphia, particularly being born poor and Black in Philly. And there are a lot of little Aylas out there. Mm-hmm. And so, that's what sparked everything, the love.
How has it been going around the country, sharing your story? And by the way, I read the book. It's a really good read. You get people right from the first page.
Thank you. It's been a bit surreal. I was backstage signing books, and I just had to chuckle a little bit because most of us who grew up in Philly, you spent a lot of time in this library, right? Especially downstairs in the children's section. And I can remember going to check out a book and hoping I had returned it so I would be able to check out one, and hoping they wouldn't know that I still had one at home that maybe I couldn't find or whichever. And so it was interesting when I walked in, I just had that whole rush of memories. And so it's been good. It's been good. It's only been, we were saying,
couple weeks, yeah.
16 days since the book came out. 16 days. So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, because your book is very personal. You share a lot of things that happened to you growing up in Philly, some traumatic stuff too, but it also is very educational. And you talk about public health inequity. Why did you decide to write this book now?
Well, a couple things. A lot of people did a lot of things during COVID that you may not have otherwise done. Will we agree? Okay.
Yep.
And I think that when you don't know if tomorrow is coming, you tend to be much more vulnerable because you're like, is this my last day or is this my last month, for one. Then the other part is someone said to me in the media, one of your brothers, I would say, said to me, Ayla, are you writing down what you're doing? I know you're in it, but I don't know if you can really conceive what's happening, like this movement, what you're doing. And I wasn't, and I was like, look, I don't have no time to write no book. We're getting the work done. But what I started to do was dictate into my phone when we were out in the field. So when people talk about how the book is conversation, like it's a conversation, like you feel like I'm talking to you, it's because I was talking to you, and I was talking into, and now we have all these great apps that it literally transcribes your words. And so if I was feeling down a particular day, that's what I hope you got on the page. The other part is someone, and I was, as you said, somewhere around the world, and someone said, oh, well, where are you from? And a lot of folks presumed that I was a sort of transplant to Philadelphia, not that I was from Philly. And so I said, I'm from Philadelphia. And they were like, oh, where? And I said, well, I was born in North Philly. And it was like, really? Kind of like, like grab their pearls, like, oh my God, I can't believe it, kind of thing. And I thought, because somehow there was this, and they definitely didn't mean it intentionally, right? But that was just a natural response. Like, someone did all of this that came out of North Philadelphia, right? And so it was even more reason why I wanted to talk about my upbringing, to say you can have some tragedies, you can have some challenges in your life, but you can also heal and you can also overcome. And then when you do that, you might just save a life and change the world, right?
Yes.
And so that's what.
Can we clap for that?
Yeah.
Because that's what you did. That's what you did. And so I want to ground everybody and give them a little bit of flavor of the book. And I ask that you read an excerpt on page 83, and I'll just set it up as you pull your page. This excerpt discusses your relationship with one of your surgeon mentors, Dr. Edward Barksdale, who gives you some critical advice. And so take a read there.
Okay. If Dr. Henry Ford was the stern father figure, Dr. Edward Barksdale was the kinder, gentler, nurturing supporter. He looked out for me. He provided me with perspective. He made me laugh. When I needed a safe harbor or made a wrong decision, he was there. He helped me mourn the loss of my grandfather. To get where I was going, I needed the help of both doctors. I wrote earlier that I was rough around the edges. And I have to say, for all the educators out there, when you come out of Philly and you go to a institution, especially if it's a PWI, not a HBCU, you're a little rough around the edges, And back in the day, when I showed up at Penn State, I had on my big earrings, I had my name on it, I had my name belt, like everything was John this, John that, and y'all know what you're talking about, and sucking your teeth and cracking my gum, and so people had to look beyond that to see that there was really, and I even feel funny saying some of these things, but there was really a brilliant child in the midst of all that. So that's what I mean when I say rough around the edges. Okay. Yes, there were sharks in the water, and sometimes they were coming specifically for me, but I also made mistakes. I was quick to boil. I could cry, though privately, a display of vulnerability surgeons are taught to avoid at all costs. I could show frustration. Was I sometimes a little too sure of myself? Dr. Barksdale liked to quote to me his grandmother saying, "Nothing superior has ever been accomplished except by those who believed they were superior to their circumstance." I told myself I was called to a purpose, not a place, and this happened to be the place to fulfill that purpose. That helped to develop a sense of personal power. Dr. Barksdale didn't try to change me. As a result of the chaos, you become better, he offered. Like Hemingway wrote, the world breaks everyone, and afterwards, many are stronger at the broken places. I didn't fully understand what he meant, not then. Keep going.
Yeah, a little bit longer. Yeah.
He told me when I made the wrong decision, such as starting a post-op patient on a diet too early, ordering too many tests, or not getting to the sickest patient first. And though I had done good research, my test-taking ability, going back to those in-service exams in my Brooklyn days, remained awful. He said my technical skills, which I thought were honed from my experience at Kings County, left something to be desired. That's true virtually of all young surgeons, regardless of race or gender or hand size. But he was frank with me about the racism in medicine, not just for patients, but for practitioners too. Ayla, as a Black doctor, as a Black woman doctor, you have to work harder and be better because you're going to be seen as half as good. And you don't have the pedigree. You have to overcome the lack of one. In other words, I had to overcome my upbringing. In some ways, I was being asked to reach the top of a ladder with missing rungs. I didn't have the foundation others had. Nothing would change that, and no one cared. I would have to make it without or not make it at all.
And you can stop there. That paragraph, I would have to make it without. I mean, I had a tear come down my face because making it without or not making it at all. Yeah. And you talk about having to overcome your upbringing. And a lot of people in here, they think they know you. Mm-hmm. They know, Dr. Ayla, you had all the PPE. That's when I met you. You had the PPE. Mm-hmm. And you were out there being a pediatric surgeon, being a doctor, being just a warrior for the community. But I wanted you to really tell people, give people a real understanding of how you grew up in North Philly.
So, and a lot of this is in the book. Y'all got to read. How many people have read it already? Yeah. Okay. Or
you should read the book, and we're going to save some jewels for you.
Okay. But. So I don't want to tell too much. Well, I don't know. What can I tell that not too much? So I guess my upbringing is similar to, again, Philadelphia is one of, if not the poorest city in the United States, right? And so I was one of those kids, which meant that we were on public assistance. We lived in Section 8 housing. My parents were young. My mom went to Germantown. My dad went to Gratz High School. We went to bed hungry.
Yeah. The neighborhood you were in.
My neighborhood, it's kind of interesting because on one hand, everybody knew everybody, but on the other hand, you still had to be looking over your shoulder kind of thing. You couldn't, we knew not to walk. You know how the row houses had those little alleyways in between sometimes? Like we knew not to walk close because you were worried somebody would get snatched into those. We didn't walk over the grates because literally people could fall in them walking down the street. My kids get a ride everywhere now, but I literally walked to school. So when I went to Lingelbach on the drive, we lived at Germantown and Johnson, and from Germantown and Johnson to Lincoln Drive, that's what, good mile, 2 miles, like every day.
And you were a latchkey kid. You had your key around your neck.
My neck. And I took care of my brother because my mom was working all the time. Back then we had food stamps, and kids would tease you because you had food stamps, and we got all our clothes at the thrift store. We ironed our sheets in the wintertime because we didn't have heat. That is Philly. If you grow up, and it's so crazy being here as an adult now, because the things that I experience now as a child, I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it existed. Like some of the homes and stuff on the main line in parts of this city, some people are born here and die here and never know some of the beauty and honestly the wealth in the city of Philadelphia. The other thing I'll say, which was a plus, two things. One, I started at an African free school called Nathamu Sasa on Queen Lane. And that's where I had my foundation of being having a proud sense of self. Of even though we were poor, I didn't feel like there was anything I couldn't do because that was instilled in me at a very young age. The other thing, and I think it still exists in Philadelphia Public School, is that they had MG classes and AT classes, so for mentally gifted and academically talented. And what that meant, if you tested into that, is that one day a week, you got to go somewhere special. And so for me, where I was at school at Fitler Academic Plus School and John B. Kelly in Germantown, it meant that one day a week I got to go, and you got to read the book to see where, but to one of the, I'll call them fancy schools in Philly. And it was just a subway ride away. But it was like it opened my eyes to the possibility of what existed. But for so many kids, it's that block, it's the 4-block radius, and that is all they ever see. So that was my
Thank you for sharing that. I saw you get a little choked up a little bit when you take yourself back in the mind talking about that. But you decided pretty early on you wanted to be a healer.
Yeah.
Be a doctor.
Well, again, twofold. And my children and I talk about this now, but the teachers paid more attention to you if you were smart. And if you were doing whatever, as long as you didn't disrupt the class, they paid no attention. If you weren't doing the work, okay, as long as you didn't disrupt the class. But if you were smart, if you were asking questions, they paid attention. As a kid, you want someone to pay attention to you. And so that's when I realized early that was going to be my way to get some of the things I wanted. Then we went to all the health centers with the numbers, which, by the way, and I had to talk to the health department. First of all, health center number 1, number 2, number 10. I mean, that is so impersonal, right? But we went to health center number 5. It's still there, off of Shelton Avenue. Germantown and Shelton, and there was a doctor there who was a Black woman, and she seemed happy, and she had on nice clothes, and she wasn't stressed, and I was like, well, damn, what are you doing?
What job is that?
Because I didn't know any Black women who were like that. All mine were like getting up at the crack of dawn, going to work, coming home late, never had money for anything, so to me, I remember that standing out. And so it was a combination of seeing folks on this college campus and also seeing this woman who looked like me, who seemed to have all the things I aspired to have, that I said, okay, this is how. So yes, I love science. But I was tired of being poor. And I thought this would be a way that I could get that.
And that's a good Black job.
Yeah, well.
That's one of those good ones, girl. That's a good one right there. And you identified that at a young age. Smart lady. But to get serious a little bit, because I had to throw that in.
Of course.
I couldn't resist.
Now you got me thinking about when I'm going to use that again. Okay.
There were so many obstacles. There are so many obstacles and challenges to becoming a doctor. But on top of it all, no matter who you are, but on top of it all, you're a woman, a Black woman, raised in North Philly. Race and gender aside, though, what about, so you said like just growing up, there were things that if you compared yourself in the medical school to some folks who had some advantages,
right.
Just being from North Philly, growing up how you grew up, there were some things that you didn't have that other people did have. What were those things?
So things you take for granted now, when I listen to my 14-year-olds talk, and it's mainly the twins, their vocabulary is just out of this world. And it's because they hear that all the time. They hear it from folks at church, they hear it in the household with my husband and I, that they, you have to remind yourself that you're talking to a child based on how they're communicating. So just something like that, because of your educational level, when it's time for you to take the SAT, you're like, oh, I can use this in a sentence, right? And so we know in Pennsylvania specifically, I'll speak about the Commonwealth, that our urban schools are fed resources at lower rates than affluent schools. And we know that our governor is working on that. However, you could clap for Josh. We could clap for Josh. Okay. And he is working on that. But prior to him coming into office, for literally over 5 decades, per pupil, the money invested in students that live in poor zip codes versus affluent zip codes was significantly, I'm talking about like 20 times greater in affluent communities, right? And it was none of our fault that's in the room, so I don't want anyone to start squirming because we weren't here. We didn't do it, right? But the people who were in charge back then decided that poor kids weren't worth as much and they shouldn't have as much money per pupil. So when you look at the buildings that are dilapidated and you look at the teachers that don't want to necessarily educate in those conditions, that's because the resources haven't been poured in. Then you add redlining to that, where you have lack of home ownership in urban communities, and it's the real estate tax and the school tax that comes from people owning their homes that feeds the schools. But there's none because of it. So it's not to say, oh, that was then and this is now, but the foundation of those things back then still have an impact on what happens today, right? And so to your question, come back. Now I can't even remember. What was the question?
No, the different things when you compare.
Oh, the different things, right. The different things
yourself.
Are the educational system. And so when I got to college, because I was so determined, but I had to teach myself how to study. I mean, I really had to teach myself how to study. And then my mom and dad did go to college, but it wasn't like I'm hiring tutors for my son for, algorithms and math and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. There was none of that type of thing if they had a challenge and they didn't have time to sit down with me and do homework because they were, working to put food on the table. And so you have to teach yourself how to study. You have to, and it would frustrate me that I knew the material, but when it was time to take the test, my test score didn't reflect that. And so being able to identify, well, what is it? And again, having a strong enough sense of self that you don't get defeated, but figure out what is it that's causing me to get a C and barely pass these exams. And so I say that to say that kids, and this is Ayla who had AT and MG classes. The rest of the kids that were just basic stuff, they don't have any of these things. Then when you hit medical school, where the majority of my peers, parents are doctors, their aunts are doctors, this is when it hit me. I did the commencement address for Temple last year. I think it was last year at the Kimmel Center. It's beautiful. They invited me, which, by the way, and I tell Dr. Goldberg this, Temple rejected me for med school. They did not. They did not accept me. Anyway, for what it's worth,
they regret it.
I still remember in my interview, they said, well, you seem more of an activist. Maybe you need to go to law school. I don't think medical school is for you. And I was literally 19, 20 years old. But anyway, I digress. So I'm doing my Temple commencement address, and they have this portion of the ceremony where if you are a family member or a parent of the graduate, not only do you stand up, but you're allowed to hood your graduate. And I watched all these folks come to the stage. I didn't see anybody who looked like me, right? And I thought how beautiful that is. I mean, I was tearing up just watching the parents and the aunts and the grandparents sometimes for their grandchild. And that generational wealth, I'll call it, because wealth is not just dollars, it's also education and opportunity, right? And certain groups, again, no one in this room's fault, okay? Certain folks were able to pass down that generational wealth and generational experience where most Black folks were passing down generational grief from one generation to the next. And you can't build on that, right? And so that disadvantage that you're alluding to that I talk about in the book became clear, and I still see it other ways when you see this next class of 200 graduates and they're all hunting one another. And, you know, my kids are 16 and 14, so if they decide, it's going to be another 10 years before that happens, right? And we're just starting to see that now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing. I think that people don't realize that is a privilege when you have, you know, a parent or a grandparent or an uncle who is in your profession.
Because you can pick up the phone when the test is hard.
Exactly.
And be like, oh, I didn't understand this part about anatomy and physiology. If you just use this acronym, blah, 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 blah. And wait, I might have some old notes I can give you. Oh, I remember when I took. Yeah.
But on top of that, in addition to just that part, you had people, because medical school is crazy. By the way, you need to read this book, and I'm not going to tell you all the story. Medical school was crazy, okay? You had people trying to hold you back. You had people telling you didn't have what it takes. You had people outright trying to sabotage you.
Yeah.
And you said in the book that sometimes it was racism, sometimes it was sexism, and sometimes it was something else.
Yeah.
How could you tell what it was and what kept you going? Because every time you turned around, it seemed like something else, like another obstacle was thrown in your path.
So I think the higher you attained something, the higher you're working to attain something that no one else has done, or there are few people who look like you, the harder it gets. Right?
And pediatric surgery,
right. As a pediatric surgeon, I was the first Black woman trained entirely in the United States in pediatric surgery. And there was a woman before me who had trained in Canada, but for 2 years, she and I were the only Black women pediatrics. I mean, can you imagine in the United States? And I finished in 2006, so it wasn't like, 1980 when I was, single digits. Anyway, so in any case, you're trying to become this. And so then it's not just someone calling you out of your name. It's more subtle. It's like none of the nurses pick up your orders on the charts. It's like there's a change with your patient status and no one calls you, but they call your superior to tell them. And then your superior is like, well, you should have known about this, but no one called you, right? And you can't be everywhere all the time. Or it's, your attending surgeon decides, the residents need a break. We're going to have a, cookout at my house, and everyone gets the invitation except you, right? Or it's, we're going to have a golf outing. And then I thought, well, maybe it was just for the guys. No, there were women that were there too, but you just didn't get the invite. And so it just, and it's more insidious, and it's just something that nags and nags and nags. And so much so that you start questioning, do you belong there? And so forth. And the people who, I could go on and on.
Yes.
But the thing about the book, is that because it wasn't that long ago, I had to have a very strong legal read for my book because all these folks are still alive. And so...
And you don't want nobody trying to come back.
So I had to make sure, Simon & Schuster wasn't going to get sued. I wasn't going to get sued, all of that. But I use it because so often, even some of my colleagues say, Ayla, I don't see it. Like, I come to work every day. I went into medicine to help people. Like, I don't have a racist bone in my body. I see everyone and all of that, but yet we have these pervasive health disparities. So because right now, as people see me, and because of all my networks in Black communities and white communities and Asian communities, it's such a beautiful, I'm loving it and loving that. Because of that, I'm using my story as an example to show you in a narrative, in a story form, exactly how it happened. And then
Yeah.
you can be like, dang, that was rough, what happened.
Yeah.
So,
And I want to fast forward because you write in the book maybe the most obstructive problem to solving systemic racism. And that's a system where you have to go through a system in order to become a thing. And there are things in the system that hold certain people back and allow other people through. And you say the most obstructive problem to solving systemic racism is that many people refuse to believe it exists.
Yeah.
And you say they get defensive if you tell them that it does,
right.
even when you provide proof.
Yeah.
And this goes to healthcare. You've presented papers, you've shown people, and if we fast forward to 2020 and COVID, I mean, it was blatant and people would not see it. Why do you think that is?
Wow. Why do I think? Okay. Why do I think it is? One of my professors, and I'm going to have to pick up the phone and call him, but one of my professors, and we got along so well. He was from Mexico, and he came to the U.S. and had to go through all these steps to get licensed. But he used to say to me, the eyes only see what the mind suspects. Right? The eyes only see what the mind suspects. And when he said it to me, it was about performing an operation and anticipating, aberrant anatomy or something where something was where you didn't expect it to be and all these sorts of things. But I believe that is true also for racism and injustice. And if your mind isn't thinking that it's there or it's supposed to be there, your eyes won't see it, right? But we need allies. We got to help each other, and it doesn't help if we point the finger at everyone. I think it's more teachable moments, because I honestly don't believe any doctor comes to work and says, you know what, I think I'm going to treat you differently because I'm white and you're black, and you don't deserve to be treated well. I really don't believe that anybody feels that way. But what I do think is that our lived experiences and our preconceived notions about people and what we believe they will conceive and understand, it directs how we deliver the care, right? And so sometimes, again, if it can be a teachable moment and not shame or blame, then that's where we get to the better health outcomes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I want to go to 2020 because you got to, you're an entrepreneur. You were juggling so many things. Pediatric surgeon, had a whole concierge company,
right.
Helping people like Will Smith, yes, the actor who saved the universe.
Yeah.
And, you're raising 3 children. You living a full life. 2020 comes.
Yeah.
You happen to be at home, you're enjoying life at home with your kids, and you're watching what is happening around you. And you wrote in the book that everything in your life prepared you for that moment.
Right.
What inside of you knew you were the person such that you went and founded the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium? Because you could have been chilling out and just hanging.
Listen.
Painting your toenails, but you didn't.
Where's my husband? There he is, back there. And he will tell you. Can we give my husband a round of applause?
Clap for the husband.
So, and he will tell you, we got like the last extra refrigerator at Home Depot. We bought all this food. He's a Costco shopper, so we had tons of toilet paper anyway. We literally were kind of enjoying being at home together. We were in our pajamas all day. We were chilling. But when you're from Philly, everybody can find you. And people were calling my mom. She was, of course, giving out my phone number. And they were saying, Ayla, I think I might have this COVID, but I haven't traveled to China, so I don't think I have it. And when I went to the hospital, they sent me home. And I was kind of like, really? And then I was, okay. And then someone else would call. And everyone kept calling. It was the same story. And then I started calling the ER and saying, this is Dr. Stanford, and you just turned away Mr. Johnson. He meets criteria. He needs a COVID test immediately. Okay, Dr. Stanford, we'll get on it right away. Would you like us to call you with the results? Yes, please, call me. And I was doing that. So what was initially chilling, watching Netflix and relaxing became an entire day of calling various ERs in the city to say, you just turned this person away and they need a test, right? And every time I did it, the person was positive, every single time. So then I called the health department, I called the FQHCs, I was calling everyone like, okay, what are we doing? I know we have this list of people who are at risk, but a lot of folks calling me are not on this particular list, and they're coming back positive. And they were very empathetic. I know, we're not sure, and da-da-da. And finally, I was like, oh, wait. And then there was the people who traveled. Okay, let me back up. Drexel reported that the testing locations were 6 times greater in affluent communities, and that there were no testing locations in the zip codes where the disease was the highest. I was like, okay, so we know that, but then people were taking buses and regional rail out to Montgomery County, where I am, only to get there and someone say, oh, you're not in a car, sorry, we can't test you. And then I would call my friends, because I've done my whole, medical career here, and say, are you really turning people away because they weren't, in a car? Well, we need to have that barrier of the car. And if their doc is not on staff, we can't be responsible for calling them back with the results and all these excuses. And I was like, are you hearing yourself?
But then the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium.
Exactly.
You removed all those barriers.
I did, because finally, I realized, okay, there's no vaccine, there's no Paxlovid. All we have is a test to give yourself supportive care and not spread it to someone else. That's all we had in our armamentarium. I was like, well, damn, I work for myself. I can get those tests.
And people don't know this. You put your own money up.
Yeah.
Mine
and my husband's.
Tests.
Yeah.
You call your friends.
Yeah.
You got all these doctors together. Yeah. I met you for the first time April 20th.
Oh, wow.
2020. I have video of you.
That was it. That was at Enon. Yeah, that was at Enon.
Yes.
And
and you did it yourself.
I did. I mean, because it was I'm thinking to myself, and you already heard, did not come from any intergenerational wealth at all. So I just have what's in the bank account and what's in my 401k, right? And so, but I'm thinking to myself, for these tests and the supplies, and the tests at the time were $50 or $100, and I had an account with LabCorp, and I said, please send me and they're like, you're a surgeon, what are you going to do with COVID tests? I'm like, just trust me, people need these tests. And finally, after maybe the 5th call, I got a person that sent me a box of 500. And they said, well, how are you going to bill for it? And I said, you're going to bill me. I'm a physician, a private practice in good standing. And again, I didn't think we was going to live anyway. So I was like, you could send me all those bills. You can send them all to me, right? So,
but you took on, you paid, you basically had them bill you.
Yeah.
And you ended up testing hundreds of people in this city.
Yeah.
And I want to fast forward because we only have 5 minutes before we have to open it up for Q&A.
Really?
I know. Really? And so, yes, we got to open it up for Q&A.
Okay.
And so when you think about all that you were able to accomplish without the city support, the federal government wasn't supporting you at first. And when the city actually had money to give, they gave it to another entity. Philly fighting COVID. Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
And so, I want you to sort of talk about why you were, as a surgeon, you were able to, somebody who's been studying disparities, somebody who's experienced disparities when you went to the hospital, even as a physician, not treated, ignored. If you think about this, what are the solutions? You look at it, you were able to see some of the solutions and just do it with your own money, with your own people, everything.
Right.
What are the solutions? How can institutions and cities and organizations do what you did?
So, all right, how many? 4 minutes? Okay. So there's so many different things. So one, there is the institution, the academic institution, the educational institution. They can do things. As individuals that even are non-medical, we can do things, and then the educator, practitioner people can do things. Okay, so first I'll start with the academic institutions. First, oh my gosh, I had to think about, can't y'all just read the book? No. I have to say it out loud.
If you were to say the first thing, and I think you even said they don't even identify it. Yeah.
There are lots of dichotomies in our city. And some kids, and I'll just use kids for an example, have access to the best children's hospital in the nation, and some don't in the same city. That's a problem. So I think a really simplistic answer is the title of my book, right? Which is Take Care of Them Like My Own. And if it is not what you would want for your daughter or your grandson or your aunt or your uncle or whomever, then it shouldn't be good enough for, or it has to be good enough for everyone. And so I guess I would say when the decisions are being made about what insurance you take and what insurance you don't take and all of that, like, these are children that have no control over the situation that they were born into. And so that's what I would say, because I got to live the rest of my life here, so I'm trying not to, ruffle many feathers. But honestly, the taking care of them like your own is just, it's everything. And if you just pause to think, would this be good enough for my little baby cousin? It's like, you know what to do. You know what to do. And when the CARES Act money came from the federal government to help during COVID, so much of it went to the bottom line of the hospitals. It did not go directly to the people, because there were all these pop-ups. They showed up in like June, and by November, they were gone. And it was hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? And so I think just people need to have that, people making decisions that look in the mirror to say, am I exacerbating health disparities? Am I contributing to these poor outcomes? Am I doing something about it? And I can tell you, if you're going to work, you're coming home, you're going to your vacation house, and you're not uncomfortable, then you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough.
And thank you. And by the way, she does list a whole list of solutions.
It's a DIY.
In the book. You
it's
should
a DIY.
probably read
it's
the
all
book.
in there. Yeah.
But we want to open it up for Q&A. But can we give Dr. Ayla Stanford a round of applause?
Aww.
And there are some areas here
so
where you can ask questions. There are 2 microphones.
Oh, so wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you, Cherri.
Yes.
Cherri.
Yes. And we have 2 microphones, and what we'll do is we ask that you keep it brief and actually ask a question if possible. And
not a comment.
Yes, a question, which means it has a question mark at the end, not just a lift of the voice at the end. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll start right here.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Okay. I don't want her to kill me. Okay. I'm going to put a question mark at the end, Cherri.
Yes.
But I just want to say, number one, she knows I'm going to say it. She saved my life. I started getting chemo about a week before I got my first vaccine from Dr. Stanford's clinic at the Leah Court Center. I thank God for her. And I think that she is an angel that he put on this earth to serve a particular purpose. And that she is living out that purpose. Question mark.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Then the other part of the question is, I just want to say, this book is so great. I am not a nonfiction reader. I love fiction because I want everything to have a happy ending. And from what I see and what you have achieved, there is a happy ending.
Amen.
But I just want to say, so this is what I had to take the cover off because I catch the bus to Center City to work. But I was so glad you gave this card out at the Kimmel Center because I make a point of kind of pulling it out. And like the lady on the bus this morning, she was like, is that a good book? I was like, this is a phenomenal book. And I'm easing my way through it because it's a roller coaster of emotion. It really, really is. Some of the stuff that you have lived through, I cannot even begin to imagine. Growing up in North Philly, all of us have been through stuff, but I'm like, hell, oh my God.
And what's your name?
Tina Bradley,
Miss Tina,
that's my soror.
thank you.
And I'm getting ready to sit down.
Thank you, Miss Tina. We are a lot of people. Miss Tina loves you, Ayla. Miss Tina loves you.
I love her back. She knows that. Hi.
I'm going to say thank you to you, Dr. Ayla, because representation matters. I don't fit any of the categories of people who needed the COVID shot right away. And I kept watching you administer these tests. And when it opened up, I was like, I'm not going to get that. And I was like, Dr. Ayla is encouraging people to get the shot. So I got the first shot, then I got the second shot, and I had an extreme immune response, which I didn't know. I had an underlying health condition that if it's not treated within months, the outcome is poor, or it's like the worst outcome you could possibly get. And I always said, oh, thank God for Pfizer. And I came here with my friend, and she was like, come on. I was like, oh, yeah, I've heard of her, and, help me get that Pfizer shot. But now I'm just saying, thank God for you, Dr. Ayla, because I was like, well, Dr. Ayla said this is okay. And that if I hadn't had that shot, I would have probably been right at my window where I would have had to have extreme medical care, and I don't know if I'd be here today. So
Thank you. And what's your name?
My name is Emma.
Emma, thank you.
Emma, thank you.
Yes. And everybody, Ayla. Ayla. Ayla.
It's a little hard for me to talk. I'm not deaf, but I'm Roz McKelvey from Germantown Deaf Ministries. And when COVID started out, the deaf couldn't get anything. You think it's because you're poor, it's because you're black. Nobody will help the deaf, and they're calling me. I don't have a medical background. And they said, call Dr. Ayla Stanford. Your mom said, call my daughter. And gave me the number. I just want to thank you for the deaf community because you said, Roz, we don't have interpreters. But if you'll go with one of them, and you started sending nurses to the homes of the deaf, we were giving them food. We were putting on shower caps and everything, gloves and house coats. We looked really funny, but we had to protect ourselves. And you sent nurses to the deaf people of Philadelphia, to their homes. They didn't know sign language. All they knew is Dr. Stanford said, come here and help y'all and do the swabs and the things. And for all of the deaf people, so many, after a while, we had them lined up at the Catholic interpreters were coming. DHCC, all the interpreters would come wherever you told them to go. And deaf people lined up and lives were saved. And I just want to say we love you.
Thank you so much. Go right ahead.
Oh, my goodness.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Williams. In 2020, I was a third-year medical student at PCOM.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I had the pleasure of volunteering for the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium in February, because I was going into rotations, but February 21 at a Leacore Center in the snow, when hundreds of people were wrapped around the building. And I didn't even expect to shed tears. But I thought about the gift that you were to this city, and I'm not a Philadelphian. I'm from Georgia, but you can't tell me I'm not from Philly, too. But as a medical student then, to see how you served and the call to action to do so. I appreciate you. But also, I volunteered again at Deliverance Temple, and I remember people would come from Montgomery County to get vaccines, and I went into the room in the back where y'all preparing vaccines one day, and I said, hey, somebody's here from this zip code. They're not from the ones on the flyer. Do we vaccinate them? And you said no, because you stood 10 toes down for North Philly. And so I appreciate you for that. So now, my question is, I do have a question. My question is, as a Black woman striving to get into orthopedic surgery residency, one of the more competitive specialties, how do you consistently recalibrate your sense of self after you've gotten kicked in the teeth 11 times? And medical school is crazy. It's wild. It's a peculiar
I can't even
experiment.
imagine. Yes.
It's a crazy thing. Anywho.
So where are you on the journey?
So I have completed a year of general surgery internship, and I did that at University of Arkansas last year, and now I'm back in Philly doing a transitional year at PCOM after going unmatched twice.
Okay. So one, you need not just a mentor, but you need a sponsor. And there's a difference. The mentor tells you your challenges, your weaknesses, and we can talk about that if you don't have one. But you need someone to say, tell me your name again?
Alicia.
I thought you said Alicia. You need someone to say, Dr. Alicia is the bomb. You need her in your program. She is strong. She comes early. She stays late. I would trust her to take care of my family member, right? Well, how come she didn't, whatever? Because she had challenge, but she has overcome all of that and she is ready to work. That's what you need, because they're going to see your application and they're going to see it. And it's just, it's this whole weed out period. So you're at the point where you need not a mentor, but a sponsor who's going to go to bat for you to put you where you need. The other thing I would say is sometimes it takes a while to get to what you want, right? And it's not that it won't happen. It's not if it'll happen, it's when, right? Because you know it's going to happen. And if you have a strong sense of what your strengths are, but what your challenges are, then you know, right? And how do I tell you to keep getting back up? I just believe that we all have a purpose here, and you've already made it through medical school. You've already made it. Like, personally, I feel like that's the hardest part, right? You've already done that. And so the rest of the stuff is really a sponsor and being with the right group of people and someone to say, and if you are committed to it, and instead of it taking 5 years, it takes you 7 years, but it gets you where you want to be, then that's what you do. And so we just have to exchange information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Can we send some good love to Alicia?
Yes. Yes, Dr. Wood. Woo!
Keep going. Yes, sir.
So I work in allied healthcare, and the difficulty I have is African Americans are dying from illnesses that are treatable. And so my question to you is, how do we on a community level spread health equity, healthcare equity within the community, within the neighborhoods? I know you're doing it on a much larger scale,
right?
But we're not doctors. How do we do that on a community
so have an
level?
answer for you. I so have an answer. So we folks from church, on your block, in your family, need an advocate. You need someone to go with you to the doctor. You need to be, if you're going in for a prostate screening, that you've gone online and you've read everything you're supposed to know about my PSA, about my family history, about genetic testing, about my urine stream, about my sexual function, about what my brother, cousin might have had, and you're ready with the questions. It's no longer that you go and you sit and wait for the doctor to tell you what to do. Like, that doctor is working for you, right? So make them answer all your questions, but you have to put in some work to be prepared to ask them. And then the other part is you accompany someone. The days of going to the doctor by yourself are done. You just don't go by yourself anymore, right? And so it's one, you have your notes, and if you have to go by yourself, it's, can I call my husband? Can I call my sister? Do you mind if they listen in? Because sometimes I don't remember everything, and I want to make sure I remember everything you're telling me, right? Other things, we need more community health workers, because those folks are patient navigators that can help you when your doctor says, here's a referral, go see a cardiologist, can help you navigate calling, waiting on hold, getting a doctor, getting it approved from your insurance company, and all these other steps that sometimes people don't know how to do, and then they just won't go. And the next thing you know, they're in congestive heart failure. So it's accompanying someone to the doctor. It's being community health workers. I just learned that Penn has a community health worker program where they're educating people in service to be patient navigators and advocating for your community.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Stanford.
Hello.
My name's Alex. I'm a family physician. First of all, I just want to thank you for your book. I haven't finished it yet, full disclosure, but I think that the vulnerability that you displayed in being able to talk about some of the things that you mentioned there is really powerful, so thank you for that.
Yes.
The question that I have for you is along the lines of talking about systemic racism and getting your health system to look in that mirror.
Yeah.
There's a bravery and there's a curiosity there that I think are both important, and I think that it requires a system to ask the questions.
Right.
Right. And what are your thoughts? And maybe the answer is read the book or finish reading the book, Alex.
No.
But what are your thoughts on getting the hospital systems to ask the questions they need to ask?
That's such a good question. Okay. So that's such a good question. So I feel like probably in family practice, there are things that you see already. Like I remember pediatrician or pediatric ENT folks talking about how Black children are less referred to get ear tubes in, and they keep coming back with repeat ear infection after ear infection, whereas white children are more likely to get referred to get the tubes put in right away, right? Things like that you see. So I'm sure in your practice, there are things that you see. So collect the data. That's it, because for all of our academic institutions, evidence-based medicine, right? Then it sort of takes the emotion out of it, right? And everything I did and talked about in the book, it was dispelling a subjective narrative with objective data, right? And you can't dispute it. And I think, and then if you find some funding to put behind it, and you can talk about how, well, the fact that we didn't refer, if I go back to the ear tubes, we didn't refer these Black and Latino children to get ear tubes sooner. They had more ER visits. They had a higher evidence of loss of hearing. They had, more infections that required days out of school and parents not being able to go to work and all of that thing. It's sort of the, ounce of prevention is worth the Ben Franklin. I should know it, right?
Yeah.
But that, and if you can show that, that's one way. The other thing is it has to come from leadership. Like the CEO, the president of the hospital has to say that we have had this many sort of untoward outcomes because of bias. And we as an institution are going to do something about it. See, once you do that, then no one feels bad about, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my tenure? Am I going to lose my, my status that I built up in the hospital? And those are two things. One is the identifying it, showing the data behind it. Obviously, the leadership needs to be the one because it becomes a top-down effect. And then the last thing for me, I think the reason why I was able to go out and say what I wanted to say, even in the book, is because I worked for myself. And I have to be honest about that. And in every institution where I've gone to give grand rounds later, they say, thank you for saying what I couldn't say. because they're working to get their status in the hospital and so forth. And so before I would go, I would say, listen, what's going on in your hospital? Tell me so I can incorporate it in my talk. So if you ask me to come and you tell me what it is, I'd be happy to put it out there, you know? And so those are some of the ways. Yeah. You're welcome.
And unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. We're quite a bit over time.
We are.
Yes, we are.
Oh, we could take 2 more. Please?
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
She says
Dr.
yes.
Ayla.
Okay, go ahead.
She is insisting, so yes.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ayla. I'm going to be quick. So the question I want to ask you, I'm a mom of 2 boys, 2, they're men now, 2 grown men, and both of whom, one has died from a terminal illness that wasn't diagnosed until he was almost dead, and the other one, he's 33 years old, he's on dialysis, this is his 4th year, and I feel that he's being treated in a certain kind of way. What I want to talk to you about is your pain, because you're a mom, you have a husband, you have a whole full career, plus now with your book, and these, when you are representing, that's the reality. You're a black woman representing all of the little black girls that's going to look up to you and the little black boys who want to go where you are, and all of us who have lived through this pain and looking for you for hope. Like Michelle Obama said, hope is back, right? But I want to talk to you at your pain. How do you deal with your pain and how that hurts you? Because you like you said, you live in Montgomery County, you like your house, you want your car, I'm sure you like your takeout and your spa day, but you don't want to disrupt that, but you know that this is wrong. So how do you juxtapose that, your pain?
I journal a lot. I find moments to be just still. Sometimes I turn off my phone, or when it dies, I don't recharge it. As long as I know where my husband is and my kids are, and anybody could reach my husband if they really needed me, I shut it all off. I pray. I have my conversations with God. And sometimes, and my husband will tell you, I just say, I can't, not right now. I can't talk, I need a minute. And so I force myself to have quiet time, to just be alone with my thoughts, and just be still. That's the best way I can describe what I do. Yeah. Thank you.
Last 2 questions.
Yeah. One and one. Okay.
Yep.
Dr. Stanford, thanks so much for being here and being who you are and what you've done. I have a very simple question. What are you going to be doing in your new job on the Penn faculty?
Okay, fantastic. Woo! So, first of all, it's kind of exciting, right? Because they wanted me, for all of the innovation, all of some people call me a disruptor. I am not. I am a problem solver. But so in School of Arts and Sciences, it is teaching the next generation of policymaker, of health entrepreneur, of doctor, of nurse in School of Arts and Sciences. When Jeb Bush was professor of practice, he taught his book. So I do believe that I'll be it's 27 chapters and there aren't 27 weeks, so it'll be a little shorter, but my book. And then I'm also working with Drew Weissman in RNA innovation. Phenomenal, because sometimes the ideas that I come up with or solution or problems that I want to solve, you're in like small company with other people who are also thinking, how do you solve or how do you achieve equitable care around the world? But in that RNA innovation, there's like a whole bunch of people that are thinking about that kind of stuff. So that when the next pandemic comes, and I hate to say it, it will, is that we're more prepared. But how are we prepared in such a way that people in Malaysia don't have to wait for vaccines and medication to come from America or come from Europe, that they are prepared to do it where they are? So there's that. And then the last part, as a research associate in Annenberg School for Communication, it is, what was the message that I was able to give as a trusted messenger? How can you dissect that and duplicate it and scale it for different communities, not just in Philly, but maybe in Allentown, and maybe in Oakland, California, and maybe in sub-Saharan Africa? And what were the things that me, as you said, as an independent practitioner, was able to resonate with the city when institutions with endowments and hundreds of millions of dollars were not able to do? And so it's, taken sort of a scientific method to it, all going towards saving lives and better health. So that's what I'm doing with them. Last question. Yay!
Okay. I'm a retired high school teacher from Savannah, Georgia. And I retired in 2008. And I was in the classroom for 28 years. And what I saw in that time was a high rate of absenteeism, or I should say a higher rate of absenteeism among the children from economically challenged backgrounds. And I would attribute it to not being able to have the luxury of preventative medicine, waiting until the children are really sick, so they go to the emergency room, which can be an all-night thing, and then, so, and it goes on and on. The older kids staying home with the younger kids.
Yeah.
So children come to school with a variety of sicknesses, a variety of fatigue. So either they wind up in the nurse's office or they wind up with their head on the desk.
Right.
This contributes to
The poor.
a generation of undereducated children. And by the time I retired in 2008, I was teaching the children of my original children, and it was the same thing going on. My question is, since the rollout of Obamacare, and granted now in Georgia, Medicaid was not expanded, so that came with its own problems, but here especially, are there statistics on, with the advent of Obamacare, have graduation rates gone up? Has absentee rates gone down? Has enrollment in secondary colleges, tech school, trade school, universities, has that gone up here?
Okay, so I can answer your question two ways. One is that I'm happy to say, and we didn't talk about this, but the ambulatory care center that I built that came out of COVID, that's at 21st and Lehigh, across the street from Dobbins, which is a major high school with 100% poverty. From the school district of Philadelphia, we are now a school-based wellness center. And so what that means, super excited, because not everyone can be that, but we were already doing it by speaking to the school nurses, and when she needed to have an escalation of care, the kids can walk across the street, right? And so what that means for the parents is while they're at work, their kids can come over and they can get caught up on their vaccines, they can get their physicals that they need, they can have an acute care issue developed. And I do believe with Superintendent Watlington and with the mayor, that is what they're trying to do all throughout the city.
Wow.
Now, regarding the Affordable Care Act, yes, more people have access, but this is where it gets back to the taking care of people like your own. So, for example, if I have insurance from the Affordable Care Act and I want to go to, any hospital in the city for my shoulder, there are only a certain number of slots for people with Obamacare or Affordable Care. So I have to wait, 3 months to get an appointment, to be seen. So yes, it has given you insurance, but the access issue, because of course the healthcare systems want better reimbursements, and they get better reimbursements from the privately insured people. And so yes, it's helped, but the federal government can only do so much once it gets to the local level, between the insurance carrier and the healthcare system, are you going to make room so that your private patients get as much as your Affordable Care Act patients? And right now, that is not what happens. And people say it's because, oh, we have to meet our bottom line and blah, 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 blah. I don't buy it, because a lot of hospitals in our city have huge endowments, that they will never lose in their lifetime, that they're working and operating off the interest of that money. Let's just call it what it is. They're not paying no real estate taxes as a nonprofit, right? So I say that to say it gets back to taking care of them like your own and saying, is this the care that I would want my child or my spouse to have? And if they just did that, a lot of things would change.